Well, welcome everyone to 2024 International ULT Day. We have participants literally from around the world, from several states to Canada, and I believe other parts of North America. I don't know about South America yet, Europe, certainly Asia, India. ULT truly is an international endeavor. Um, Today, we will discuss some things about the United Lodge of Theosophists. We have a very full program. We'll have three short presentations, three readings from some significant ideas and players in the Theosophical Movement from ULT, readings from Robert Crosby and B.P. Wadia. We will have two slightly longer talks on the work of Crosby and of Wadia. Um, Before we start, though, let's just a reminder, keep our mics muted unless you're asking a question, which we'll have a chance at the end of the meeting to hopefully to gather and discuss a bit. I was asked to say some things about the United Lodge of Theosophists, why it's significant and why it's important in today's world. We probably all have heard the phrase, the idea that ULT is an association of students. It's not a formal organization. It's more a model, one might say. Robert Crosby called it a ULT was a uh, based on certain principles and ideals. So I think we will be dealing with the principles and ideals of ULT and some of their practical applications. Uh, it's important to note that the ULT associates belong to ULT as a whole. Um, we are not restricted anymore, certainly have never been by geography. Most of our meetings now are held more by time zone than anything else. Uh, would like to note that Universal Theosophy and the United Lodge of Theosophists are two aspects of the same work. The website was inspired by the same ideals. Universal Theosophy website hosts classes. It serves as the library, actually, for ULT. There are other ULTs that have excellent libraries. A couple that come to mind, and I'm sure I'm missing several, but India and Phoenix, Arizona both have had significant online libraries for several years. Uh, so ULT is not a Theosophical Society, nor it's certainly not the Theosophical Society. Uh, I, the thing that ULT does is function really as a school of theosophy. Uh, it focuses on the writings of H.P. Blavatsky and William Q. Judge, and I think for reasons that we will hear something about in today's presentations. But perhaps the most essential idea is that there be no intermediaries between the inquiring mind and the search for truth. Put simply, there is no Church of Theosophy, certainly not in ULT. And Crosby's genius was in pointing to the teachers, as Judge pointed to HPB, and Blavatsky herself pointed to her teachers. So his reiteration of her idea, follow not me nor my path, follow the path I show, the masters who are behind. This is the model student that Crosby kind of created for us, if you will, or exemplified. There were others before, certainly have been others since. And we could fairly say that in all the theosophical societies, all theosophical groups, have individuals and perhaps even lodges that function essentially as ULTs simply because they follow the same ideals, the same impersonal work on behalf of others, the lack of attention on any one individual as an authority, and a focus on the teachings. So with that, we'll begin our program. today with a broad look at the wisdom tradition. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Jerry for that. Jerry?
Thank you. The secret doctrine, and therefore Theosophia, is the accumulated wisdom of the ages. This is the statement that HPB gives us in the secret doctrine. If we look at Theosophy in the broadest and most universal terms, it is a wisdom tradition that participates at the hidden heart of all authentic, spiritual, philosophical, and scientific investigation. In fact, we are told it is the parent doctrine, the trunk of the tree of life that has many branches. It is sui generis, meaning of its own kind, and cannot be compared with any other. It is primarily esoteric, but only esoteric because of the blindness of men and the atrophied condition of our spiritual senses. The wisdom tradition is really the wisdom of Mother Nature, metaphysically noumenal nature, and is present all around us whether we are perceptive enough to see it or not. It is the wisdom of the cycles of life which pervade the cosmic and earthly ecosystem. Its mysteries are contained in the human body with its 36 trillion cells interconnected. It is the currents of the sea and the currents of the stars. Great teachers, witnesses to the cycles and systems so ancient we simply cannot fathom them, are the custodians of this wisdom tradition. It is the parent doctrine from which many names throughout the centuries have been ascribed. The Sanatana Dharma, the perennial philosophy, Pistis Sophia, the Kabbalah, the Gupta Vidya, and in our time, the secret doctrine, or Theosophia. It does not belong to any civilization or time exclusively, but belongs to each and all. It transcends civilization and it transcends time. It is the inheritance of the human race and our most sacred possession, but unfortunately appreciated by too few. In the words of the voice of the silence, alas, alas, that all men should possess Alaya, be one with the great soul, and that possessing it, Alaya should so little avail them. The wisdom tradition is the science of spirituality, the philosophy of perfectibility, the religion of solidarity. It is the interior metaphysics of all the subtle planes of what men call the spiritual. It is the dialectic needed in the quest for truth. It is the unveiling of what is real. It is the quest for knowledge in true philosophy. It is the unifying source of the sacred, and therefore the ethical imperative of altruism and service and religion at its best. In the 4th chapter of the Gita, the keynote teaching of the Kali Yuga, Krishna proclaims, "This exhaustless doctrine of yoga I formerly taught unto Vivishvat. Vivishvat communicated it to Manu, and Manu made it known unto Ishvaku. And being thus transmitted from one unto another, it was studied by the Raja Rishis, until at length, in the course of time, the mighty art was lost, O harasser of thy foes. It is even the same exhaustless, secret, eternal doctrine I have this day communicated unto thee, because thou art my devotee and my friend." For the last several thousand years, humanity has lived under the cloud of superstition and materialism. The modern Theosophical movement is the heroic attempt to enable the life-giving ideas of Theosophia to re-enter the arena of human life at a more profound level. It was the life work of H.P. Blavatsky and William Quan Judge who worked so tirelessly for its dissemination. We are told that the Theosophical Movement, the reintroduction of ideas like reincarnation, karma, human solidarity, universal enlightenment, and human perfectibility are not for the amusement of the select few, but more importantly, they are the cornerstones of the civilization of the future and are addressed to one and all. The wisdom tradition does not need more monasteries, churches, or synagogues. It does not need more ascetics, monks, and disciples per se. What Theosophia needs is exemplars. Men and women from every walk of life who are willing to take the best ideas they can fathom and bring them to bear in the conduct of life. What is needed is people willing to put the needs of their fellow man before their own. One of the great masters said, "If you would know us, study our philosophy. If you would serve us, serve our humanity." Are we willing to take the ideas of Theosophy seriously enough to model our lives around them? These universal principles, propositions to the beginner, working hypotheses to the serious student, and eternal truths to the sage, become for the student of Theosophy the building blocks of a life well lived. The right attitude and motive in the quest for wisdom is epitomized in these precious few words in the voice of the silence. Can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shalt thou be saved and hear the whole world cry? The wisdom tradition is the doctrine of hope, because each man can direct his own destiny. Excuse me. It is the doctrine of self-reliance, because as Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true, and as the night the day, thou shalt not be false to any man." It is the doctrine of common sense, because the universe is on the side of growth. It is the doctrine of integrity, where there is a harmony between thought, word, and deed. And above all, it is the doctrine of compassion, because it is at its core the heart doctrine. How practical is this wisdom in our everyday lives? The principle of unity means we are all connected on inner planes. We are part of one family. It is the insight to know how to benefit others and also what not to do. It is the ability to say the right thing at the right time to the right person in the right tone of voice to promote the good. It is the capacity to communicate not only our thoughts to the mind of others, but our hearts to the souls of our fellow man. It is the ability to enter into the world of a child. It is the patience to meet a man or a woman on entirely equal terms, soul to soul, regardless of age, station, or position. It is looking for the pilgrim soul in each and all of us. It is the art of taking universal principles and applying them to specific situations. It is the willingness to be silently supportive. It is the ability to say no when no is the best answer. It is the courage to make tough choices and the capacity to disagree amicably. It is the resilience to be patient with one's own shortcomings and therefore even more patient with the shortcomings of others. It is the ever-expanding disposition for loving kindness. Wisdom is the capacity to extract meaning and detect beauty in the smallest of things. It is the contentment and abiding calmness that comes from a profound trust in the universe and the wisdom that lies within and behind it. The wisdom tradition is the long view, the vantage point of the immortal soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. We'll now have a presentation on the idea of a nucleus.
To read. So it's funny. uh, in his article, Yours Till Death and After HPB, Judge says, "You were not directed to found and realize a universal brotherhood, but to form the nucleus for one. For it is only when the nucleus is formed that the accumulations can begin that will end in future years, however far, in the formation of that body which we have in view." And isn't that a relief? We're here to form the nucleus around which universal brotherhood can begin. Now, on September 11th, 1893, at the World Parliament of Religions, Judge gave a talk on universal brotherhood, a fact in nature. There's also a speaker, we had speakers from the East. Swami Vivekananda actually started off his talk addressing the audience as "my sisters and brothers." And this drew apparently a 2-minute standing ovation. Interesting how the gender idea, came up then and was applauded, and how beautifully. So, Judge, in his talk, which you can access online, says, "I have been requested to speak on the subject of universal brotherhood as a fact in nature, not as a theory, not as a utopian dream which can never be realized, not as a fact in society, in government, but as a fact in nature. That is, that universal brotherhood is an actual thing, whether it is recognized or not." Yep. This noble doctrine has become a danger at times. The reason is that men have denied the fact, and we can see that happening today. And Judge says, "We propose to show you, if we can, that it is a fact." First of all, you'll notice that when it rains over a certain area, vast numbers of people are affected universally. That's one proof, a small one, but also in society and business life, we are affected together because we are all united. In the evening, we come home at the same hour, we eat similar times, we digest together, we lie down to go to sleep together. Aren't we united in our lives and brothers even at that? Even in a financial crisis, people feel this around the world. But what is it that they're feeling, right? The Theosophical Society desires above all things not that you should understand spiritualism, not that wonderful occult works should be performed, but to understand the constitution of matter and life as they are, which can never be understood but by practicing right ethics. Live with each other as brothers. The misery and the trouble of the world are of more importance than all the scientific progress that can be imagined. And he concludes by saying, whether you're whatever denomination, try to practice universal brotherhood because it is the universal duty of all of us. And, this was an interesting part of this lecture, where maybe we see hints of the astral life. The doctors will tell you there is a finer perspiration you cannot see, the invisible perspiration, which goes out a short distance around about us. We know it comes out from every person. The emanations of each person are affecting every other person, being interchanged always. All those in this room are affected by these nations and also by the ideas of each other. And so, in every direction, wherever you go, wherever you look, we are united in whatever plane, the plane of mind, as well as the plane of body, the plane of emotions, of the spirit. whatnot. We are all united, and it is a fact from which we cannot escape.
Thank you, Helena. Were those your closing remarks? Wanted to make sure I didn't cut you off. We're going to change gears a little bit and hear a reading from the writings of Robert Crosby. Monica, do you the honors, please?
From Robert Crosby's The Friendly Philosopher. The question of personality is so large that it might seem as though its successful solution should resemble the working out of a complicated mathematical problem. But the greatest truths are the simpler. And if we reflect a moment on what impersonality is not, perhaps that will help us to see what it is. Some orate forcibly against personality. That does not prove they are free from it. Some say little, but the effect of what is said is to imply that they are impersonal. They seem so modest, but are only politic. Some are afraid to talk about personality, thinking that it must be shunned as an ogre. Yet others preach a doctrine of impersonality, which takes everything human out of life and makes of it a cold negation. This doctrine has no patience with evolution. All faults must disappear at a single stroke. Impersonality isn't talking. It isn't silence. It isn't insinuation. It isn't repulsion. It isn't negation. Above all, it isn't a diplomacy which masks ambition. Impersonality means freedom from personality. But none of us are going to attain that right away. We are doing well enough if we are persistently, albeit slowly, overcoming. For practical purposes, if we are developing the child heart, if we are learning to love things beautiful, if we are becoming more honest and plain and simple, if we are beginning to sense the sweet side of life, if we are getting to like our friends better and extending the circle, if we feel ourselves expanding in sympathy, if we love to work for Theosophy and do not ask position as a reward, if we are not bothering too much about whether we are personal or impersonal, this is traveling on the path of impersonality. So much for the individual, to endeavor to get broader and freer, to merge itself more and more into the living spirit of the movement, its higher self, to neither despise itself because it is a form, nor exalt itself because it has a soul, to become less doctrinal and more human. Thank you.
And you aren't looking away.
Thank you, Monica. Well, now, in that light, in view of those words from Mr. Crosby, we're going to have a presentation on the idea of true impersonality. Dominique, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The question is, why should we talk of impersonality? We know as students of Theosophy and of course those we are all ULT students, we know that impersonality is a key part of the ULT policy for conducting meetings and magazines as well. Robert Crosby has been a very insightful observer of the development of the history of the original TS, Theosophical Society. And impersonality is one of the takeaways from his observation. We know that he was very close to what happened starting at the time of HPB and then after the departure of Judge. So there is a need for impersonality in any association. However, for us Theosophists, we can see several reasons why we should focus on impersonality and put it in practice. First of all, and this was mentioned, I'm sorry if we have some kind of overlap, but it's very important to come back to these ideas. First of all, there is this leitmotif of Robert Crosby, how to draw attention to the message and its true messengers, HPB and Judge, who were sui generis. Second is avoid the craze for successes and for new teachings, very important also. Then preserve direct access to the teachings by any new inquirers without any screen or deformation or invention. As Crosby says in his writings, Theosophy pure and simple. Also, another point is how to avoid leaders that make you think what you have to think. Each one is responsible for himself regarding the teachings. There is also another point we would like to make regarding deeper implications of impersonality. A true inner spiritual progress demands impersonality. We cannot get around that. It is part of self-discipline and access to self-knowledge. I'm going to make a few quotes from Judge, coming from his letters. Some are more known, others are less known, but to illustrate this point of the importance of impersonality in this path of inner spiritual progress. Here is what Judge wrote in some of his letters. When anyone is regularly accepted as a chela on probation, the first and only order he receives for the present is to work unselfishly for humanity, sometimes aiding and aided by some older chela, while striving to get rid of the strength of the personal idea. The ways of doing this are left to his own intuition entirely, inasmuch as the object is to develop that intuition and to bring him to self-knowledge. Another, he who does not feel irresistibly impelled to serve the race, whether he fails or not himself, is bound fast by his own personality and cannot progress until he has learned that the race is himself and not that body which he now occupies. Another, before you can become an occultist, you have to give up every prejudice, every earthly liking, every feeling of preference for one thing over another. It is easy to fall into black magic. The natural tendency is to black magic. And that is why several years training is necessary to cut away every source of prejudice before power can be entrusted to you. An adept must entirely separate himself from his personality. He must say, I am a power. And then to finish these few comments, an extract that I think a lot of you know, which is a practical advice on what to do to get rid of this grip of personality. This is this following. Begin by trying to conquer the habit, almost universal, of pushing yourself forward. This arises from personality. Do not monopolize the conversation. Keep in the background. If someone begins to tell you about himself and his doings, do not take first chance to tell him about yourself, but listen to him and talk solely to bring him out. And when he has finished, suppress in yourself the desire to tell about yourself, your opinions and experiences. Do not ask a question unless you intend to listen to the answer and inquire into its value. Try to recollect that you are a very small affair in the world and that people around do not value you at all and grieve not when you are absent. Your only true greatness lies in your inner true self, and it is not desirous of obtaining the applause of others. If you will follow these directions for 1 week, you will find they will take considerable effort, and you will begin to discover a part of the meaning of the saying, man, know thyself. Thank you.
We are dealing with minds, not persons. The soul, being conformed to the mind, reacts upon the whole nature. If, as persons, we could all look at the world of ideas in that way, we would learn more, gain more discrimination, and be more useful to others, so meriting their guiding influence. It is karma, all of it. Students should realize that and benefit by the knowledge. The right start is everything. If this is gained and held, then all that each one does carries him and others in the right direction. Either Theosophy, pure and undefiled, is the most real thing in the world, or we are wasting our time and effort. If we are able to conceive its reality in all seriousness, we should then never cease trying to understand and apply what has been recorded by Master's messenger for our guidance and instruction. What is the distinction between Theosophy and anything else? In fundamental principles, I should say. Nothing else affords an all-inclusive view of existence. All kinds of sincere efforts help. All kinds of systems contain some truth, but they all fall short because they all exclude or ignore some part in nature. Theosophists of every degree should realize that under karma, much is required of those to whom much has been given in opportunity and knowledge. We can only use our opportunities and knowledge to the best possible advantage and continue to do so if we would not ourselves fall short of the requirement of the law of laws, compassion absolute. What has been done has been of real and lasting advantage to many. There are others yet unborn, yet to come. This is the time when one wishes to be like Brahma, with eyes, heads, mouths, and ears in every direction. Read the tidal wave in Lucifer if you would learn how HPB felt and feels. The real point of issue is the divine nature in man. The real basis of work is to impress this on the minds of those who come. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. With that as prelude, we'll have a presentation on a tribute to Robert Crosby. Russell?
Thank you, Wes. This is not so much a tribute, I think, as an appreciation. I think as I think Robert Crosby, he was a principal founder in the year 1909 of the United Lodge of Theosophists, along with a small number of students of Theosophy who had come to know him as a trusted and a dear friend and mentor. And he left his body 10 years later in 1919. By all accounts, he was anything but flashy or charismatic, and he often was content to kind of remain in the background. He made no claims on his own behalf. He offered no new teachings. He made no pretensions to occult status or psychic powers, or to have special access to advanced beings. And he wrote no books. He did, however, write numerous articles for various magazines, especially the magazine Theosophy, which he got started in 1912. And he wrote wonderful letters to students and friends, encouraging them in their theosophical work and offering his understanding of the theosophical teachings, which was profound and deep. He often gave lectures at meetings, many of which were taken down stenographically. And a large selection of these letters and transcribed lectures were assembled into a book several years after his death, and was named very appropriately The Friendly Philosopher. And even though Crosby passed from the scene over 100 years ago, students of Theosophy today find that the letters and talks contained in The Friendly Philosopher still often resonate deeply and speak at a level which is accessible and often seemingly simple and direct. Yet it is a simplicity which can only arise by reason of a very deep understanding and assimilation of the theosophical teachings. One of the qualities that those who knew him often spoke of was his ability to communicate and reach people where they needed to be reached. He understood the difficulties and confusion and struggles which students so often encounter, as he had been through many of these same struggles himself. And and was able to offer words of advice here and there, or point in some direction or some aspect of the teachings that was often exactly what the student needed. A ULT associate who knew Crosby very well and who was one of the original founders of ULT, wrote this in a letter which was written in 1959, 50 years after the ULT was begun. And she says in this letter, indeed, I do feel inexpressibly deep gratitude to Mr. Crosby for the searchlight he threw on Theosophy for us. But from the first, it was the teachers, not Mr. Crosby, to whom we gave our attention and study. It is the years of attention to their writings and work that brought us to appreciate Mr. Robert Crosby. And he didn't care whether he was appreciated or not, if only we saw HPB and Judge. And this focus, we could say, arose from the insight of Robert Crosby and his recognition and his willingness amidst the context of a theosophical arena in which there were many claiming to be successors of HPB or successors to Judge, as well as offering their own further so-called revelations and embellishments of the teachings. And for him to firmly and bravely proclaim the occult status of Madame Blavatsky and her colleague William Q. Judge as sui generis, the teachers of genuine Theosophy as it was originally presented over the course of their careers. And this was not due to any sort of blind personal devotion or claims or sectarian following, but due rather to his study and assimilation of the philosophy they brought to the Western world. That was the role, we might say, that Crosby saw for himself as his duty to fulfill, especially during the latter part of his life. One of refocusing and restoring the Theosophical movement to its original source of inspiration and teachings, Madame H.P. Blavatsky and those that she herself pointed to as her teachers, and whom she so relentlessly served on behalf of humanity, as well as to point to the importance of studying their teachings for ourselves and applying them in daily life. Crosby was born in 1849 in Montreal, Canada. And he was raised as a Presbyterian, but he was always full of doubts and never became a member of the church. And throughout his youth, he had an interest in such things as spiritualism and clairvoyance and hypnotism and telepathy. But he later said that he had a natural sense of wariness about it all and kind of sensing the dangers in these pursuits. When he was about 30, he went into business with an older partner, and they manufactured shoes and leather goods. It was a fairly successful business, and some years later they sold it and moved to Boston, where they started up another leather business. But Crosby's theosophical career really began in the late 1880s, and he got news that there was going to be a branch of the Theosophical Society that would be established there in Boston. And he attended its first meeting. And the teachings of Theosophy appealed greatly to him, and he joined the society in 1888. And soon thereafter, he met William Q. Judge, one of the co-founders of the Theosophical Society in New York in 1875, who had come to Boston to give a lecture. And they were introduced, and they afterwards became very close friends. And of this friendship, Crosby wrote this, and after Judge died in 1896, and Judge wrote this in a little tribute to him. He says, the first theosophical treatise that I ever read was his Epitome of Theosophy. My first meeting with him changed the whole current of my life. I trusted him then, and I trust him now, and all those whom he trusted. To me, it seems that trust is the bond that binds, that makes the strength of the movement, for it is of the heart. And this trust he called forth was not allowed to remain a blind trust. For as time went on, as the energy, steadfastness, and devotion of the student became more marked, the real WQJ was more and more revealed, until the power that radiated through him became an ever-present help in the work. As such, it remains today, a living center in each heart that trusted him. Well, Crosby never met Madame Blavatsky, who was working in Europe at that time. They did have correspondence, and his life, and he became one of her devoted students. And Crosby committed his life to theosophical study and work. And in 1892, he became president of the Boston branch of the Theosophical Society. HPB died in 1891. And sadly, as the years went by, there came a time of turmoil and strife within the society. Some in Europe seemed to be jealous of Mr. Judge's role and resentful of his fidelity to HPB and to the teachings and to the lines of work that she had set forth. And there were some nasty charges that were brought against Mr. Judge, mostly having to do with accused him of dishonesty and of forgery and a number of other things. And he was attacked, and then he was exonerated of all these charges, and then after which he was continued to be cruelly persecuted and betrayed by some of the prominent European members of the TS. I don't want to get into the sorry details of these events, other than to say that there arose a growing recognition among much of the membership that it would be best for the work if the American branches of the TS were to become autonomous. And in 1895, Mr. Crosby organized the 8th convention of the American section of the TS in Boston, during which most of the membership voted to break formal ties with the TS and organize the Theosophical Society in America. And this was kind of a big deal. And much of the thinking that was expounded during that convention concerning the relatively unimportant role of organizations in promulgating theosophy and carrying out the objects of the Theosophical Movement became embodied later in the Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists. And in this connection, it is interesting to consider the words of Mr. Judge, who wrote in a letter that was addressed to the European Theosophists shortly after this event, and explaining the reasons for it. And at the conclusion of this letter, Judge wrote this. He said, "Let us then press forward together in the great work of the real Theosophical Movement, which is aided by working organizations that is above them all. Together, we can devise more and better ways for spreading the light of truth through all the earth. Mutually assisting and encourage one another, we may learn how to put theosophy into practice so as to be able to teach and enforce it by example before others. We will then, each and all, be members of that Universal Lodge of free and independent Theosophists, which embraces every friend of the human race. So we can really trace the roots of the United Lodge of Theosophists back to this event at which Mr. Crosby was very much on the scene. Mr. Judge died in March 1896, and soon afterwards, many of the prominent members of the TSA in New York proclaimed a successor in the person of Catherine Tingley. And she quickly assumed the role of a rather powerful and charismatic leader. Crosby, who was in Boston at the time of Judge's death, gave his full support to her and went along with the program, having always at heart the promulgation of Theosophy. And under Mrs. Tingley's leadership, the TSA acquired a large tract of land at Point Loma, California, which is adjacent to San Diego. And under her direction, the headquarters of the TSA was moved there, and a rather strong theosophical community grew up. And at Mrs. Tingley's request, Mr. Crosby and his wife left Boston and joined the Point Loma community in 1900. And after a fairly short time, Mr. Crosby became increasingly dismayed by the direction the work there seemed to be taking, finding that the program of work and teaching set forth by the original founders of the society was kind of taking a back seat to other pursuits. And however worthy and beneficent many of those pursuits undoubtedly were, it was becoming increasingly difficult in that situation to promote and engage in a study of Theosophy as it had originally been presented. And he was also troubled by the authoritarian and rigid attitudes that he found were gradually emerging. So he and Mrs. Crosby left in 1904 and came to Los Angeles. They were practically penniless, and he took a job as a bookkeeper at the Los Angeles Times. And he later wrote about this time at Point Loma, and he said it was a hard schooling for me, but it had its good uses and effects. And perhaps one of those good effects was a deeper insight into those facets of human nature that which tend to bring about dissension and friction among Theosophists. He had this to say in a letter that he wrote later. He said, "The average person makes much of organization, form and method, authority and whatnot. And in crystallization of ideas, defeats understanding. Thus the attacks, splits, controversies, and other foibles that have been perpetuated during the history of the movement in this generation. You must have noticed that all the difficulties that have arisen in the TS raged around personalities. There have been no doctrinal differences. This is significant. And soon after he moved to Los Angeles, Mr. Crosby obtained a charter for a branch of the TSA that had been formed under the direction of Mr. E.T. Hargrove, who had split off from Mrs. Tingley fairly early on. And he managed to attract several new students to the theosophical work, and they held regular meetings at various locations in Los Angeles and surrounding communities. Then, arising from a growing feeling of frustration with the often irksome organizational and administrative demands and expectations of the parent society, they decided to do away altogether with the organization of the TS and form an association based on principles suggested by Mr. Judge in some of his articles for The Path magazine. And so the ULT came into being in February 1909. A declaration was drawn up, largely put together from various writings of Mr. Judge and widely circulated among Theosophists. And it was announced that we're here to study Theosophy as it was presented to the world by H.P. Blavatsky and her colleague William Q. Judge and the Brotherhood of Adepts whom they served. And you are welcome to join with us. And so Crosby spent the remaining 10 years of his life working to promote theosophical study and work on this informal basis without any formal organization or officers, and based upon the mutual trust and solidarity that grows from having a similarity of aim and purpose and teaching, and upon the self-induced and devised efforts of those choosing to align themselves with the lofty aims of the Theosophical Movement. Following his death on June 25th, 1919, there was a little obituary that was printed in Theosophy magazine. And most of that obituary was taken up with the following quote, and from one of Mr. Crosby's letters. And I'll conclude my remarks with this quotation from Mr. Crosby. How shall we apply Theosophy in daily life? First, to think what we are in reality on arising, to endeavor to realize what this small segment of our great existence may mean in the long series of such existences, to resolve to live throughout the day from the highest of our realizations, to see in each event and circumstance a reproduction in small or in great of that which has been, and to deal with each and every one of these from that same high point. Resolve to deal with them as though each had a deep occult meaning and presented an opportunity to further the successes of the past or undo the errors. Thus, living from moment to moment, hour to hour, life will be seen as a portion of a great web of action and reaction, intermeshed at every point and connected with the soul which provided the energy that sustained it. If each event is so considered throughout the day, be it small or great, the power to guide and control your energies will in no long time be yours. The smaller cycles of the personal ego will be related to the divine ego, and the force that flows from the latter will show itself in every way, will strengthen the whole nature, and will even change the conditions, physical and otherwise, which surround you. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. And so with that as a kind of summation of Crosby's work and the formation of ULT, we turn to hearing something from the writings of one who helped spread Theosophy and spread the work of ULT around the world. We're going to hear some of the words from B.P. Wadia.
One of the difficulties under which students of Theosophy labor is the practical and therefore one-sided or distorted view they take of the wisdom religion. For some, Theosophy takes the place of an outworn creed. For others, it provides a better field for philosophic speculation. For a third class, it is the interesting study of a new science which instructs where modern knowledge breaks down. For still others, through many varied associations which exist in the name and for its sake, avenues of some altruistic expression. Only a few seem to recognize the synthetic character of Theosophy, namely that it is a religion of spirit, free and immortal, that it is the philosophy of heart to be practiced universally by us all the time, that it is the science of life which instructs us in self-devised methods of never-dying energies, moving in the direction of universal self-consciousness, that it is the teacher of the higher altruism, which calls for self-correction and growth from within on the part of every being, resulting in the growth of all. Such a recognition will inevitably lead him to study every theosophic truth from 3 points of view: spirit, mind, and matter. Also to apply every truth in the 3 distinct spheres of heart, head, and hands. Such study and practice will convince him very soon that the synthesis is rooted in and proceeds from within his spiritual being, but affects through his actions the deeds of others, through his likes and dislikes, the pleasures and pains of others, through his thoughts, the minds of others, and that in turn he is so affected by others. If Theosophy in study reveals itself as a synthesis of religion, philosophy, and science, in applying its tenets and doctrines, we soon begin to sense that an additional or 4th factor exists, a kind of oversoul, which is the higher altruism. Altruism is the absolute whose 3 aspects are religion, to be lived in terms of philosophy, to be learnt, and of science, to be practiced. To practice, to learn, to live for and as all is to manifest the living power of Theosophy. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijaya. So with that as introduction, we'll hear some words on the work of B.P. Wadia in spreading Theosophy. Vikash, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Wes. During my early years of childhood, I was fortunate enough to meet a few senior Theosophists who had come in contact with B.P. Wadia and became devoted students of Theosophy because of his guidance and influence. All these students were full of vitality, and I noticed in them a sense of purpose, inner equanimity, clarity, compassion during all the ups and downs of life. That was the influence of B.P. Wadia. In the pamphlet, The Studies in this Voice of Silence, which is a deep examination of the meanings in the Voice of Silence, B.P. Wadia provides a penetrating analysis, making available new insights on it. Similarly, the Studies in Secret Doctrine, which is available in 2 volumes, brings together many valuable articles by B.P. Wadia on the study of secret doctrine. They are taken from Theosophy magazine during 1922 to 1925. So this was the magazine in ULT, LA. And then we have the Theosophical Movement magazine from Mumbai, ULT, from which these other set of articles were taken from the year 1934 to 1936. BP Wadia had a deep insight into the true nature and purpose of H.P. Blavatsky, and her monumental work, The Secret Doctrine, which provides invaluable um, commentaries on its meaning and study, which is available in these two volumes. So till date, we see that many students find these very valuable in their study of secret doctrine. And in fact, many students we know have been pulled towards lifelong study of secret doctrine because of these articles. Mr. Wadia remained steadfastly a devotee of HPB all his life, having found the ULT and rediscovered for himself the value of judge as a link, antaskarana, to HPB. He never put himself as an individual or a person forward, but stayed in the background as a kind of reserve energy, as the great hidden motor, a power that encouraged others to grow, to make themselves fit for the work and proceed. He, in fact, served as a safety net for such as might need assistance when their own short-sightedness got them into difficulties. Mr. Wadia was not only an important part of the modern theosophical movement, especially for the United Lodge of Theosophists, which owes much of its international presence to his endeavors, but also a chela, a high disciple of the Eastern masters, who were the real founders of the movement and the teachers and the co-workers of H.P. Blavatsky, with whom he was directly in touch. Kindly go to next slide, please. In Living the Life, Mr. Wadia says, masters have but a single will. All of them have a single feeling, compassion, a single teaching, ancient and constant, is spread by each of them, cycle after cycle. One lodge or fraternity, one school of wisdom exists, and its mighty custodians are ever trying to reproduce a miniature copy of it in the mundane world. This is the true inwardness of the institution of the path of chelaship. We'll go to the next slide. So here we have a timeline of important dates in the life of BP Wadia. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of this, just highlight some key events. And if someone is interested, they can later pause the video recordings and go through the same. In 1900, he was introduced to the secret doctrine, and in BP Wadia's words, it was like coming home. In 1907, he visited the island of Elephanta Caves near Mumbai, where at one of the caves he had the vision of the master. Again in 1918, while at Adair, he had a vision of HPB. This and the previous vision changed his entire life, which then dictated his next phase of life, and he dedicated his entire life to the cause of Theosophy. Mr. Wadia attempted during over 2 years from 1920 to 21 to bring about a change in the leadership of TS at Adair and elsewhere, pointing to the true Theosophy of H.P. Blavatsky and the secret doctrine. Working with Annie Besant and others at the TS in Adair and trying to secure their understanding of the wrong that had been done to Mr. Judge and to the whole of Theosophical Society in America, as well as to members everywhere within the TS between 1894 and 1896. Finally, he was disappointed and he quit the Theosophical Society in 1922 to ally himself with the American-based ULT, which was more closely aligned to Blavatsky's vision. There he spent the next 5 years in LA and New York before returning to set up ULT branches in Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, and Bengaluru in India. We'll go to the next slide. So Wadia actually became very disappointed and left the TS to work with ULT in LA. In his letter to TS, he mentioned, I have come to the conclusion that TS has strayed away from the original program inspired by the original impulses, whereby the masters brought it into existence through the help of their messenger, H.P. Blavatsky. It is no more a society of seekers of the wisdom, but an organization where many believe in the few and blind following has come to prevail, where shams pass for realities and the credulity of superstition gains encouragement, and where the noble ideas of theosophical ethics are exploited and dragged in the mire of psychism and immorality. Theosophy as a system of thought put forward by the masters through HPB has ceased to be a serious subject of persistent study, and that which has taken its place has little resemblance to the original virile, healthy, and profound teachings. The TS as it exists today is disloyal to Theosophy and its holy cause, and I regard that those who remain loyal to the Theosophy can not be loyal to the TS. And then on 1955, 20th August at 7:17 p.m. at Bangalore, India, Mr. B.P. Wadia left his body. Can we go to the next slide, please? Following are some key extracts from his last talk, Our Soul's Need, before leaving his body. The care of the soul and the soul's instruments require a higher kind of knowledge. Knowledge is the key to personal and physical plane success. But it is wisdom which is necessary for seeking the soul and securing its help and cooperation. It's guidance for the mind. It's inspiration for the heart. What will be the most practical way for us today to perceive the basic principles of this ancient divine wisdom? Let us present to you three great ideas on which the science of soul is founded. The ancient rishis and their modern heirs have taught. 1. Everything existing exists from natural causes. 2. Virtue brings its own reward, and vice and sin bring their own punishment. 3. The state of man in this world is probationary. Philosophically, it is taught by all mystics that unity binds all souls into one grand mosaic. The test for every human soul consists in his understanding and appreciation of the fact that the human kingdom must be regarded as a family. Behind an underlying diversity, there is unity. There are feuds and wars between us and others, individually and nationally, because there is strife between our own two natures, the animal and the human. Our test, therefore, lies in destroying in ourselves the immorality which springs from the egotism, and in acquiring the spirit which sees the divine at work everywhere. We are so saturated with our small sins and petty crimes that we fail to see that our greatest sin, our ghastliest crime, is to live and labor each as a unit separated from others. Destiny, nature, God tests us on this point of love for all, as against the love of our own self, or even the love of a few, our kith and kin, our friends and countrymen. Every time we widen our circle of friendship, our sphere of service of others, and offer our compassion to all, our gratitude to the givers of bounty, On each such occasion, we have passed our test as probationers on the path of life. Underlying all our labor of love in this institute should be the inculcating of this grand verity by precept and by example. And apart from this, I would also like to share that he started the Indian Institute of World Culture here in Bangalore, and also very important, I would say, facility for the students, which was named as William Conger's Cosmopolitan Home. In the next slide, we can see the day the photograph was captured during the inauguration of the Cosmopolitan Home for the students. Mr. B.P. Wadia is sitting in the center, and third from the left on the same row from bottom, the second row, we have Sophie Tenbrook, and most of you must be aware of her. She worked very closely with Mr. Wadia, and she was a very dedicated student of Theosophy here with us for many, many years. And I had the good fortune to study Theosophy with her 30 years back. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikash. Wow, we've heard a lot. Maybe a few words in summation before we conclude. And when we conclude, we will have a reading of the Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists. We've heard a lot of wonderful ideas, and we've heard about the perennial philosophy, that portion of that eternal wisdom that we know of as Theosophy. We've learned about a path through that wisdom, a path open to all human beings, a path in that ocean of toward that ocean of knowledge, which is very shallow for some, very deep for others, as Mr. Judge outlines in the beginning pages of his work, The Ocean of Theosophy. These principles all point to the need for selfless service on behalf of others, that the best way to begin that service is to ally oneself with like-minded individuals, a nucleus for a universal brotherhood is not perfect. We make mistakes, we're humans, but it's important to note that the principles of Theosophy, the principles upon which ULT was founded, are truly universal. They don't just belong to us. They're embodied daily in Theosophists of all persuasions, of all traditions. And that process of following that path is, again, as we said, open to everyone, because it relies upon an expectation, an understanding, and the principle of the divine nature of each human being, so that there is something in everyone, every single one of the 8 billion informed now and the billions not incarnated at the moment, that can understand those ideas, because they are, as HPB once wrote, impacted in the imperishable center of our nature. So while these principles are eternal, their methods and applications have to vary with the times. A few years ago, we wouldn't have had this kind of meeting held because of the technology available to us today, and yet the principles are still the same. And no doubt, as we move forward, new methods, new means, new ways of disseminating and sharing these ideas will no doubt be found. Well, let's never confuse form with function. Never confuse the outer name with the spirit within. That is true of each of us as individuals. It's true of groups. It's true of organizations. It's true of associations. It's true of governments. It's true of humanity as a whole. The outer always conceals. The inner reveals when it's given an opportunity. So that's really probably enough said. We'd like to have then a reading of the Declaration of the ULT, after which there will be time for us to remain if one wishes to. We will consider questions and comments from all of you. And again, thank you all for coming. We appreciate all the time and effort it took to be here at this time. And those that spoke and read so well, thank you. Let's turn now to the declaration. Justin, would you please?
The policy of the Lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical Movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the ends it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a true realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that all unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, whoever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be better able to help and teach others. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. So that concludes our formal meeting, but if people would like to stay, make comments or ask questions, we certainly have time to gather and mull over a bit what we've just heard and read. You'll have probably best to raise a hand if you have a comment or a question. Judy, go ahead, please. Judy, you'll have to unmute.
Yes, thank you for these beautiful readings and comments. I think it's very important that we understand the meaning of impersonality because it has been misunderstood. In my view, some people think it means being cold or non-compassionate, unable to love, rigidly formal. And this is not the meaning at all. What it means is that we're trying to emphasize the work of the higher nature and not of the individual, and that the ULT is and never was founded to aggrandize any one individual, including H.P. Blavatsky. She was always very humble and stayed in the background. Or Judge, or even these great teachers, Judge and Crosby, they were not there for themselves, they were there for the ideas. And so we don't use the guru system. We point always to the ideas. And I think that's important. But there's so many people who think somehow that we're cold or unfriendly because of this idea of impersonality. And I wonder if some of you'd like to comment on that.
Thank you, Judy. Wonderful question. It's hard to know sometimes just how to be impersonal. It's not something we as a culture, as human beings, necessarily practice from the time we're little. We have a lot to say about me and our psychology, our social norms, our economics, our government. Everything is about the person. So it's not an easy kind of question to answer. We could certainly do better. So yes, do we make mistakes in trying to be impersonal? Absolutely. Could we do a better job? Certainly. Maluka, would you like to address this question? Did you have another or both? You're welcome to do so. Thank you.
I agree with you, Dan, what you said. Yeah, we certainly have to, one of the things is hard to be humble and understand that everybody has their own opinion and we have to respect that opinion because we all are in a different levels, of understanding as we grow every day or try to grow every day. And I think the compassion and the patience, like you mentioned, to understand what everybody is going through or doing, because everybody's fighting their own wars. Like the Dalai Lama said that whenever you're kind, be kind and be compassionate because everybody's fighting their own battles. Regarding I just want to share with you a couple of things that I experienced in the last few months.
Sure.
And there is a movement, very beautiful, from the Theosophical Society of wanted to work together with ULT members. And some of us were approached and we are working as well. What is beautiful about it is that the concentration of the talks and studies from them is pure HPV, the original books of HPV. They're studying, they've been doing classes on the Ocean of Theosophy in both Spanish and English. And there is amazing new, I will say the newcomers and the new movement, maybe new souls that come in to sort of strengthen that movement as well. Because the master said that the Theosophical Society will always live. That's the master saying that. However, there will be branches that will just disappear. And obviously, we all have going through that, even in ULT as well. But I think that I like the fact that we can unite because after all, Theosophy, we're supposed to, practice Theosophy and be brotherly. So I just want to say that maybe the direction of the Theosophical Society, maybe in the future, would be more like ULT, is what I see that is happening right now. And in different part of the world, not just in the United States. And I just would like to express a short message from the 5 messages from H.P.B. Blavatsky to the American Theosophists in 1890. And one of them was the 3rd message. And I wish this to all of you brothers and sisters all over the world. May Theosophy grow more and more a living power in the lives of each other, of our members. And may the coming year be yet more full of good work and healthy progress than the one just closing. It is the wish of our humble co-worker and fellow member. And thank you very much for the lovely presentation. It was very inspiring. Thank you for your work.
You're welcome. Thank you, Maluka. Well said. And it's good to recognize when good work is being done, isn't it? And so we're not working so that people will call themselves Theosophists, certainly not working just so they call themselves associates in LT. These are useful, but useful only in their context. We're working so that human beings exemplify those 3 objects of the Theosophical Movement and work toward establishing that universal brotherhood that we all aspire toward, but we all know we haven't yet achieved. But it's work of ages and it's the work of lifetimes. So Theosophy helps us put that into perspective, does it not? Are there other comments or questions? Jerry, please go ahead. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to continue on with the discussion, and thank you, Maluka, for that. That was wonderful. I wanted to continue on with the impersonality question that Dominique so wonderfully presented and was asked by Judy. I think you could say that maybe one way of looking at it is that the impersonality concept is really kind of the altruism idea in action. It's just the simple act of putting your concerns, your interests, your life behind those of others, not in front of them, which is the human condition is one of egotism, and we're trying to overcome that. So it's an interesting kind of paradigm shift to think that you would lead a life rather than promoting yourself and putting yourself first, to put yourself second. And in trying to adopt the attitude that what can I do to help? How can I support? How can I be of aid? I think it could be as simple as that from one point of view. And then the other thing too is I think the impersonality idea has nothing to do with getting in the way of all of us being friends and getting to know each other and getting to know each other's lives. That is not, being impersonal has nothing to do with being cold and heartless, as others have mentioned. I think it has everything to do with warmth and generosity. Thanks.
Great comment, Jerry. Thank you. Can't really say that too often, can we? Had some wonderful comments in the chat, and appreciate your appreciation and thoughts there. So, and Ray, go ahead, Ray, and we'll get to you, Monica. Sorry, I didn't see your hand before.
Please let Monica speak.
Floor.
Well, thank you, Ray. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate hearing about the journey of both Mr. Crosby and Mr. Wadia, and thinking about the courage it must have taken to forge another path, having seen something going on that they didn't feel in alignment with. And I love their show of devotion. I think that the Jnani path, this path of study, sometimes gets a bad rap, as it were, because it's not, the idea of devotion is not always included in the idea. But it's perfectly included in the idea, I think. I'm learning. And these two pillars of understanding and devotion definitely show that. Lastly, once again, the commercial idea of what it means to be impersonal is just done away with by Mr. Crosby, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have looked at the passage that I got to read, because he kept the human and the human heart front and center with this whole idea of being impersonal. And so for these ideas, I am thoroughly grateful. And of course, grateful to be with you all today in remembrance of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Ray, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Les, very much. And I would like to just express the kind of wonderful feeling it is to be connected on this day. And it's interesting how Zoom or this new technology, relatively new technology, has allowed us to reach out in ways. And initially I thought, oh, this is not impersonal, but kind of a dull and numbing form of connection. And yet over the years, I see that it kind of reaches around the world. And I frankly would not have wanted to do anything more except to hear from our friends and students and those interested in theosophy from all around the world. It's kind of wonderful. And if that's the trade-off for not being able to meet locally and have a closer touch or sensitivity to fellow students of all characters, not just, I mean, ULT in terms of its participation in the Theosophical Movement is seen in the, as felt in the hearts of everyone who just wants to be, to transcend the limitations of where we are in this incarnation. And I guess I would only say one thing publicly if people don't happen to read the chat, to welcome Kimberly into this to this group. And we all came to it in different ways, and just having a new addition is a nice experience. And if we could ever find how to have a directory that doesn't make vulnerable the security issues, I would certainly want to be part of that and be able to what would one say, keep in closer contact with people that I hear speaking and bringing up things that are that I'd like to do more than just dropping into a chat line. Other than that, thank you all, and look forward to our
Welcome. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate your comments. It's a good thought. And we do need to keep in touch
Jerry,
with one another.
your contribution. Bye-bye now.
Ray, did you want to add something there? I'm sorry, I cut you off. My apologies.
No, not at all. I need to be cut off, and it was good being able to speak. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what's been said about the heart, I think it's important. I think Blavatsky wrote that we're friends with anyone and every effort that helps ameliorate the suffering of any part of life. And central to that is helping to improve the ideas that are out there. So we influence in many ways we're not aware of, not just individuals we're close to or those that are in our own families, but there's an influence of these ideas as they're shared amongst other theosophists in the world at large. And let's not underestimate the power of ideas whose time has come. And it really is a time for this idea of universal brotherhood. It is a time to look past the forms and the dogmatisms and the conflicts to the real heart of each and every human being, and to try to find those ways to share that heart and to further the progress along the path of every bit of life. I thought I saw another comment or two, a hand. Dominique, come back to you. And Maluka too. We'll get to you both. Go ahead, Dominique.
Yes, just a very quick comment regarding impersonality. I think the very first training ground is all the meetings we have in which we all participate, because this is where, as ULT students, it starts, in fact. So we have to start from there, and of course try to expand it to our everyday life in all the people we meet, social life and all that. But we already have on our plate a lot of items, so why not start with that? And probably it's important to keep that in mind, because we have also to set an example for the newcomers. And this is really the right spirit the legacy of Crosby, of course. Judge behind him, but Crosby. So just a final word. Thank you for everyone. This was a wonderful participation. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Maluka, go ahead, please.
I agree with what Dominic said. Is very, very important that we think that way and continue. I was just going to ask you a question. Do you know where I can find HPB did a quote saying that 500 theosophists can save the world? I mean, true theosophy that practice theosophy as supposed to be. Do you know where I can find that quote? Anybody? It seems very inspiring.
Dominic, you have an answer for us.
I think it's a judge who's saying it. I think not Blavatsky, it seems. But I'm not sure. We should find it.
Yeah, it's a good one. Whenever I try to mention, people get very inspiring because they know that, you know, it's not large quantity, but, you know, quality, and the strength of is 500 people considered to billions and billions. It's just amazing. Thank you.
I think, thank you. I think we can find that. Jerry, go ahead. I'll bet you know offhand.
I do not know. I something along those lines I remember hearing, but I don't know.
It's Judge, yes.
But no, I just wanted to make another point, a practical point. We have a plethora of meetings and activities now available to us that we didn't have pre-COVID. Groups all over the world are vigorously starting up various discussion groups that include being online. I mean, there's a handful, just a handful actually, that are in person only. Almost all the meetings now are in one way, shape, or form online. And I wanted to encourage people to do something that I've been trying recently that I've really enjoyed and benefited from, is I'm kind of meeting hopping. I've been trying to go to as many of the various meetings from different groups other than ones close to me and try to participate with them. And I want to encourage all of you to try this too. Even though the lodge may, or the group that you're with, may be comfortable to you, but spend some time in some of the other groups as well and sprinkle in your insights and wisdom into them. I think the cross-fertilization of having different groups of people coming together in these various meetings is really, really healthy and helpful. And I also want to thank you for all of those groups who keep those meetings going and have put them online so they're available to all of us. And this is true in Paris, this is true in London, this is true in Philadelphia, it's true in New York, it's true in Ontario, Canada, you know, it's true here in California. There's an awful lot of excellent study groups that you can participate in if you can stay up late enough or wake up early enough sometimes to join in. For example, Vikash joined us, you know, to give his talk, and it was 11 o'clock at night in India. You know, bless his heart. So thanks for that. But anyhow, I know Judy, for example, like myself, we cross paths a lot, are participating in many different other groups. So I just want to encourage people to try that out. If you go to theosophyult.com, which was a site set up by Theosophy Company primarily to promote all of the activities together, you should be able to find all sorts of meetings there. We're still posting and organizing it. So if you've got a group and a meeting that's not shown there in any way, let us know, and we'll make sure to add it. But that's a good place to go to see what the activities that are about, that are currently underway, that you might be able to join. And I myself intend to visit some of the ones I haven't gotten to yet. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Jerry. And it's, you know, it's also possible if you're someplace where there isn't a theosophical group, it's very possible there are others that aren't too far from you, or at least are in the same time zone, if that makes it more convenient. We can have in-person meetings, we can have online meetings, there's certainly no barriers there except our own interest and ability to participate. So it truly is an international endeavor. It's not just the United States, Americas, or Europe. It's India, it's Africa, it's the Caribbean, it's in Mexico. We have, I think, 2 ULT lodges now. So there are growing shoots everywhere. They're small, but they're growing. And this is the opportunity for the future for us to continue to grow and to continue to find new ways to share these timeless ideas. Anyone else have a last thought or comment? You're welcome to do so. Well, I know we haven't said everything, but we have said a lot. So thank you all from around the world for all of your participation and your thoughts, questions, and efforts.